Good afternoon. My name is the Reverend Michael Crumpler, and welcome to the International Stigma Conference Workshop on Faith, Trauma, and Healing. In this session, we will open a conversation about how faith can be a source of both healing and trauma, even sometimes for the same person. Faith can be both a personal experience and an institution. In this conversation, we will center the experiences, journeys, and perspectives of stigmatized people from marginalized and vulnerable communities. As I named already, I am the Reverend Michael Crumpler, and I am the LGBTQ and Multicultural Programs Director at the Unitarian Universalist Association. My pronouns are he and him, and I live in Brooklyn. I also do a lot of organizing, community support in spiritual spaces, 12-step recovery, particularly focused on the recovery and healing of Black queer folks. And I'm just happy to be here, and I will pass to Erica.
Wonderful, Michael. Thank you so much. I also am thrilled to be here. I'm Erica Poellot. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am in the Bronx, New York. I serve as the Minister of Harm Reduction and Overdose Prevention Ministries for the national setting of the United Church of Christ. I'm also the founder and director of Faith and Harm Reduction, a collaborative project of National Harm Reduction Coalition and Judson Memorial Church in New York City. And I am also a person engaged in a long-term healing process from substance use disorder, which has looked differently across time. Sometimes it has meant abstinence and 12-step fellowships. Other times it has included harm reduction strategies, use of medication, treatment for PTSD, but at all times it has been rooted in community. Thank you. And I will pass it to Hussein.
Greetings, my name is Hussein Turk and my pronouns are he, him, and his. I am based in Southern California, was living in Los Angeles for the last 9 years, but recently moved down to Orange County rather. I am a lawyer by trade, and by training, I practice civil rights law, as well as labor and employment law, and some immigration and asylum law as well. Formerly the director of the Los Angeles HIV Law Policy Project, and am now working in private practice and still doing pro bono work with LGBT refugees and asylum seekers from South and Central America. I am also in recovery from substance use disorder and am HIV positive and am Muslim. So this topic is both near and dear to me professionally and personally, and I'm very grateful to be sharing this space with you all today to talk about it. I will pass to Louie. Louie, you're muted.
I'm muted now. Thank you. My name is Louie. I'm a person since 1996 with HIV, cured of Hep C in 2005. I'm a harm reductionist, and I work at Bach, New York, where I am a peer delivery syringe exchange worker, outreach worker, as well as a that we try to distribute naloxone, in which I participate in reversing would be fatal overdoses. I'm committed to the mission of Vocal, which is about community health and social justice, around issues pertaining to those that are incarcerated, the homeless, those that are who use drugs, as well as sex workers and people living with HIV on low income. My pronouns are he and his. And I'm very honored to participate in this conference, because subject matter topic is very near and dear to me. And I'm looking forward to my participation in this conference with my fellow panelists. And
Thank you so much.
Mike.
Yes, thank you so much. And Louie, we're having a little problem hearing you, so you might want to turn off your video or perhaps switch to a stronger signal on your internet. Not sure if you're on Wi-Fi or cellular. But while you get that sorted out, so there are 3 questions before us today that we will discuss as a panel. The first being, what does faith mean to you? And the second being, how does that come into play in your personal and professional life as it connects to stigma? And how have we used faith to dismantle stigma personally and professionally? And I'll go first. So what does faith mean to me? Faith is everything. I was born and raised in the South, in North Carolina. It felt like a deep South because it was very, very, very rural in the middle of nowhere. And there were, churches all around, both white and Black churches. But growing up, I didn't know any other church but the Black church. And it was everything. I also grew up in a family. My mother was young and had 4 of us. I think I'm the third that she had by the time she was 23. And so we lived in a mobile home trailer, but on the land that my grandfather farmed. I didn't even know we owned the land at the time. And so I grew up going to church on the weekends, but also grew up in the juke joints and at the pig barbecues and the card games and the liquor houses on Fridays and Saturdays. So I had a very, very mixed upbringing. And for me, I learned very early on the dichotomy between the sacred and the secular. And I lived in great fear of hell growing up. And we were a family that knew well the indicative of being saved, as we called it. And so alongside of that was the early recognition that I was gay. And so that for me was just a source of terror and stigma. How we were living in the house was stigmatized, right? A woman not married with a bunch of children, smoking and drinking and partying. And then on the weekends, that gospel, that old Southern gospel. So stigma, was deep in me, and faith was deep in me early on. I knew very well that if I was going to have any kind of a successful life, I would need to find faith, get to know Jesus, learn how to call on him, hold on to his hand, his unchanging hand. So deep within me, that was the case. When I was older, I did just that. At about the age of 19, I made a commitment to Christ in basic training in the Air Force, and was quickly kind of like acclimated to what we understand today to be white evangelicalism. So again, the stigma of, homosexuality and race was at the forefront of that. And it wasn't until years later, after coming out, that I discovered liberal progressive faith and anti-racism and queerness. And so for me, faith has always been a journey. It's always been at the forefront of my heart and of my mind, always both a space of terror and a space of comfort. And I'm just glad to be on this journey. My faith continues to evolve. I continue to be just amazed at what it means to have faith, what it means to be around people of faith, and at the conversation that is happening right now publicly around faith and how that intersects with race and how that intersects with queerness, particularly trans identity and kids and sports and all of that. And it excites me and both maddens me at the same time. So it's great to be here. Erica.
Thank you so much, Michael. As I was thinking about this session and this question on this day specifically, I arrived quite simply at, I have faith in harm reduction. And I'm not speaking of harm reduction as a set of risk reduction or public health strategies. I'm talking about harm reduction as a revolutionary movement for social and racial justice. I have faith in the power of the harm reduction community and the possibility for transformation and justice that is community-led, specifically led by people who have been most marginalized. Fundamentally, I have faith in people who use drugs. A belief that people with lived and living experience are the necessary leaders in this moment of our movement, that our expertise and wisdom will be critical as we seek to challenge the racist and classist war on people who use drugs. And just to punctuate that piece, I am purposely lifting up the distinction that the war we are engaged in is not a war on drugs, but it is a war on people who use drugs, poor people, Black and brown people, pregnant and parenting people, LGBTQ people. And this faith of mine is born of the recognition and experience that people who use drugs have long been ministering to one another and to us, to me, and have long been leading this prophetic movement to build power and transform this world to one which sees and celebrates the reflection of, the embodiment of the divine in all of us, but especially in people who use drugs. Hussein?
Faith, according to the dictionary, is defined as a strong belief in someone or something. And when I read that definition, the first thing I thought of was that in my active alcoholism and addiction, I always had faith in the dope dealer, no matter what. No matter how long it took for the bag to arrive or for the call to be returned or for the text to be responded to, I had faith that he was going to come through. And that was kind of the first experience of true and complete faith that I had in my life. Growing up as a gay Muslim person of color in the Midwest, in a small suburban, semi-rural area of the country, I quickly lost faith in this country, in this country's version of democracy that does not allow all participants to participate equally. And I lost faith in the police. I have a long list of things I don't have faith in. But when I thought about how I just had this blind faith in drugs and in the people that provided them to me, I realized that faith has been a very important part of my life. As I moved out of active using and into recovery, I learned first and foremost to have faith in myself. And to have faith in the voice that comes from within that I believe we all have and that we all can tap into if we can be silent and willing enough. I've also developed or had to develop faith in the law. Otherwise, as a lawyer, I would be spinning my wheels, practicing something that I did not believe in. And having faith in the law has been a very complicated journey for me. I have had the privilege of studying law with some of the founders of critical race theory, and I earned my law degree with a specialization in CRT. And one of the founding principles of that school of thought or paradigm is that the law has been a vehicle for maintaining white supremacy and other hegemonic institutions that keep Black and brown people oppressed and in positions of inferiority and disadvantage. At the same time, CRT has also taught me that the law is one of the mechanisms for reversing that. So I choose to focus on the latter and really firmly do believe that if I practice the law with faith and with a commitment to certain principles, many of which are principles that I learned about and came to really internalize through my practice as a queer Muslim, such as community, social justice, socialism, love, beauty, and tolerance. If I practice the law with those principles in mind, then wonderful things do happen. I have had the privilege of working with some really just resilient and beautiful clients who have literally traveled the world with nothing but the shoes on their feet and the clothes on their backs. And they had faith that they kept going. I apologize, I got a phone call. They had faith that if they just kept on going, then they would reach the place that they wanted to get to, and that things would work out for them. And so I've tapped into the faith of my clients in moments when I didn't even have faith in their claims for relief or other legal solutions that they were seeking. Most recently, I have had the privilege and been such a blessing of working on the Bach case, which is a case that literally fell into my lap. I was walking down the street and saw a group of protesters outside of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department in West Hollywood. And I said, I want to hang out with them. It's a group of brown and black people in West Hollywood, which is not really seen or heard of. And that's how I got involved in that case 4 or 5 years ago. And over the summer, we got a conviction. And it's complicated to celebrate a criminal conviction as an abolitionist. But eventually we did get law enforcement to do something proactive about a very, very critical and dangerous situation in Los Angeles that was literally killing Black gay men. And that was because as a group, we had faith in ourselves and in the legal process. So that is what faith means to me and how it has shown up in my life. I will now pass to Louie.
I'm muted. Thank you. Faith has been an experience in my life that has been always with me, even though I wasn't aware of it. And it has been an evolutionary process with me, even though I've been a heroin user for over 3 decades, injecting heroin. You know, as a Black man, you know, being brutalized by police, you know, especially doing a stop and frisk, you know, having been formerly incarcerated, having been homeless without housing on the streets, you know, having wound up, and I believe was my last shelter. This journey, this faith that I was not aware of, this, I believe, a power, you know, universal power greater than myself was always in operation and working, you know, even though I wasn't aware of it, through people, you know, and especially through community. And it was at this community shelter that someone who I love very dearly and still do love very dearly, you know, had told me that he had been diagnosed. I think it was in 1989. And he died. And along with others, you know, in that community of homeless people, people without housing, you know, trying to recover from homelessness, you know, began to die. And as we were at the memorial service, this is where that faith became more real and palatable to me, when in his death, you know, and we talked about everybody and everyone we have loved and lost and continue to love, you know, I was angry, very angry. And I was angry because he was my best friend, my closest, dearest friend. and he died alone, never knowing that his best friend also was living with HIV. And that angered me such that I was moved to stand up in this memorial service. I believe that was an act of faith. I just was like moved. Something moved me to stand up, open my mouth. You know, though I had a position in that shelter, nothing mattered but that I say that I was no more ashamed, you know, or afraid, you know, and that I was living with HIV, you know, and others like myself, you know, who were without housing, you know, who had histories and were currently using drugs, you know, together we just, you know, took a building, you know, in Harlem and created a place for ourselves that was safe, you know. It was a community that we created ourselves that was intentional, that was functional, that was conscious. You know, how all that was coming together. This faith was a power that came from a source that led to action, you know, and the motive of it was love, you know, and the guidance of it, you know, was with us, you know, as we created a place, you know, with nothing, you know, that wound up becoming something that was from food stamps to $2.1 million. You know, we created, you know, we who were the homeless without housing, now we're now housing people, you know, like ourselves, you know, in creating a place, a safe place where they can live. How does that happen? How did that happen? How could that happen? So I came to believe that there's a greater power than myself that even helped me through my substance use. I'm currently on medicated assisted therapy. I use Suboxone, you know, and I have, you know, a talking, you know, I have a therapist. I talk, you know, therapy and medication management in my personal life, but it's led me to continue, you know, to reach back, you know, to others that I see every day that are suffering, you know, from the injustices of our racist system, you know, and people that are dying every day. Yet here I am, 65 years old. You can never tell me that I could have ever seen this day. I'm alive. There is definitely something that I don't have to give a name to it for it to be, you know, but it works through people and through community, you know, and through love, you know, and through action, you know, in real ways, you know, that reaches people where they are, you know, and where they're at, you know. That's why I've, you know, we call it harm reduction. That was harm reduction housing. You know, that housing still exists today, you know, but it's more, you know, in terms of even how I see myself, the self-loathing and the self-hatred I don't have, you know. You know, it's like this famous prayer, you know, that I love very much, the prayer of St. Francis, you know, make me a channel, you know, of your peace. You know, where there's hatred, let me bring love. You know, where there's injury, pardon. You know, where there's doubt, faith. Where there's darkness, you know, light. You know, where there's despair, hope. Where there's sadness, joy. You know, oh, divine master, man, not so much seeking to be comforted, but to comfort, you know, to be consoled, but to console, you know, to be understood, but to understand, you know, it's in giving that we receive, it's in loving that we are loved, you know, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, it is in dying, you know, that we are born into life eternal. That for me is the way I choose to live my life, and it wakes me up every morning with gratitude, and humility, and I'm so grateful to be alive and well and sober and free, from prison. But to go back to those very places that through it all, who woke me up from that overdose? Who woke me up from that overdose to get me to live when someone else would die? So I believe it's much greater. There's more to be revealed. There's more to be discovered. It's beautiful. It's phenomenal. And it brings me into a relationship with the people that are on this panel, and those that are listening. So faith is very real to me. It's nothing spooky, and it helps me challenge the stigma and the racism and the injustice. It's a faith that gives me the power through community to bring change and to be a change agent.
Amen. Amen. So just amazing to hear all of you. As we move into our second question here, that I'll post in the chat. How does that, meaning your faith, come into play in your personal and professional life as it connects to stigma? And I'll switch it up a little bit, let someone else go first. Hussein.
So I mentioned the Ed Buck case, and I want to kind of describe the fact pattern to you all who are not familiar with the case. Ed Buck is a wealthy, white, older man who has lived in West Hollywood for many, many years and was very active in local and regional politics as a candidate, as an organizer, and then also at the national level as a donor, and had donated over $500,000 over the course of his political career to primarily Democratic candidates and elected officials. And he also, at the same time, behind closed doors that did not remain closed, thanks to the work of some brilliant people that I am in community with, he was hunting vulnerable Black men, the majority of whom did not have housing or didn't have stable housing, who were mostly unemployed, who were addicted or vulnerable to become addicted, who just needed food. And he would promise them housing, he would promise them food, he would promise them shelter, he would promise to help aspiring actors meet agents and get auditions. In exchange, all you had to do was go over to his house and let him inject you with drugs, after which he would then derive sexual pleasure and gratification from watching his victims and survivors suffer the consequences of being dosed with lethal amounts of crystal methamphetamine, GHB, and other narcotics. In the course of this really dangerous fetish that he had, at least two Black men died. The first was Jamal Moore, who passed away in 2017. And the next was Timothy Dean, who passed away in 2019. When Jamal's body was found, the community group that I worked with urged the police to do something. We have to arrest this man because another Black body is going to, another lifeless Black body will be found in that apartment if something doesn't happen. But because of Ed Buck's political connections, because of his race, he's a white man, because of his age, because of where he lived, he was able to get away with it. And one of the things that I've always said is if the races and the roles were reversed, if a young blonde hair, blue eyed white man or white woman was found dead on the floor of the living room of an older Black man in an apartment littered with drug paraphernalia, that Black man would probably get shot on the scene by the police, let alone given a fair chance at some sort of investigation, or given the benefit of the doubt that these were just drug addicted prostitutes who were taking advantage and just happened to do too much. But when they're Black sex working drug addicts or drug users, they don't get the benefit of the doubt. They don't get the protection of the state, of the police, of the judiciary that is supposed to protect us all equally, but we all know it does not. So this is the Ed Buck case. And after suing the county and losing, we sued for failure to prosecute and to investigate based on the violation of the Equal Protection Clause. And that argument did not win because, again, these legal theories were not designed to protect brown and Black people. But at the same time, these are the legal theories that we have. And as I shared earlier, I have to choose to have faith in it and to be able to push hard enough and to be consistent and persistent. And then the right result will come. I've learned that the right result doesn't always come in the way, shape, and form that I envision it when I set out to prosecute a case. In the world of lawsuits, we often think of the right result as winning. In this case, in our case against the county, it was dismissed at a very early stage. The district court said, you can't sue a prosecutor or the county for failing to investigate something based on the race of the victim. That's not how the Equal Protection Clause works. And so unfortunately, that case was dismissed. However, the language of that lawsuit was copied almost verbatim by the federal government about 2 years later when they decided to press federal criminal charges against Ed Buck. So the legwork that we did in our initial filing ended up setting the groundwork for Ed Buck's arrest. And I also shared that I'm an abolitionist. So regardless of what someone has done, I do not believe that they deserve to be arrested and locked in a cage. At the same time, I do believe that dangerous criminals should be taken off the streets and put somewhere where they cannot harm others, and that they should be rehabbed. And this opens the door to another topic for another conference. So I'm going to close it. And if anyone wants to follow up with me on that, then I would be happy to entertain a discussion on the conflict between abolitionism and fighting for survivors and victims and other potential survivors and victims of sexual and racial violence. But so Ed Buck was arrested, he's been convicted, and that all started with this kernel of faith that that I and my colleagues and my comrades shared in really pushing for some change. That faith I shared earlier also has come not just from within, but also from the clients that I have had the privilege of representing, and primarily from the transgender women and girls under the age of 18. So I use the term girls, and that's how they identified, who came on foot from Honduras and Guatemala because they were fleeing violence and they were saving their lives by running away and coming to a country, the US, where they still could be killed for being trans and brown. But they came here anyways because they had faith that there was something better and something safer and something different. And to witness that level of faith and that conviction and that self-determination was just such a profoundly transformative reminder that I really have nothing to fear. I was born with a winning lottery ticket just by virtue of being in this country. And so there is so much to have faith in. Faith is a choice. Faith does not have to be all or nothing. It can be complicated. in the way that my fight for a criminal conviction is complicated by my commitment to abolitionism. Because frankly, Ed Buck is also HIV positive and a drug addict, and was probably very much hurt and traumatized in his youth or in his young adult life as a queer person coming of age in consciousness in a time when gay men were dropping like flies because of HIV, and where they couldn't come out in the way that we can be out today. So who am I to say that he needs to be locked up in a cage with the keys thrown away? But I do have faith that as we continue collectively to fight for social justice on all fronts, not just the law, because the law alone is not going to save us. But if we continue to fight for social justice and change on all fronts, I do have faith that the right result will eventually come. And I will now pass to Erica.
Thank you so much. This is just an incredible conversation. In all the settings that I work in, really the same guiding mission drives my efforts, and that really is about mobilizing the power and social capital of communities of faith and their leadership to advance liberation, health, and wholeness for communities impacted by overdose, trauma, the stigma of substance use, and racialized drug policy. It's about shifting power to people who use drugs and other people impacted by the war on people who use drugs. It's also rooted in the creation of spiritual resources and liturgical language that speak to lived experience and is authored by folks with lived experience. It's also about the creation of spiritual community that welcomes all and seeks to be a balm for those who have been imprinted by trauma and othering. It is about relationship building fundamentally, providing an opportunity to witness to experiences beyond our own and perhaps beyond our ability to understand. For so many people who use drugs, myself included, communities of faith were experienced as locations of harm, of othering, of exclusion, of hearing that the complex psychosocial health condition I was contending with was a moral failing, a manifestation of character defects, a constitutional flaw, and which saw the substance use or substance use disorder rather than me, rather than the person. It has also been about erasure for many. Following a sermon on harm reduction, scores of congregants and community members reached out to say they had never heard the drugs issue talked about with compassion, without judgment, from within a sacred space, from a place of power such as the pulpit. Most said they had never heard their names, their children or their lovers' names included explicitly among the community of the beloved. As a result of breaking that silence and of offering a new way of understanding substance use and the people who use them, of naming and breaking apart the stigma and shame, people reported an ability to show up in church in relationship with self, with the divine, with more and more of themselves, with their whole selves, that they were able to finally tell and be their whole stories, even those ones which had never been uttered aloud. People who use drugs were proclaimed to be holy enough, holy and enough, to be beloved, and we are. Louie? I think you're still on mute, Louie.
Thank you. It's a beautiful conversation. Truly, it truly is. It's increasing my faith. But I recall, the blessing of having lived and be able to reflect early in this epidemic, which will be 40 years old, AIDS World Day, 2021. And my diagnosis is 1986. I remember when we created our own home in a place that we could call home, out of faith, because my faith is one that is a power greater than myself that leads to action. It materializes into action. It's not just a talk. You talk and talk, but we walk. We walk our talk. It's demonstrating. But I recall many a mother in my culture, in my community, whose sons played the Hammond organ, and they would bring them to, our home, our community. And they couldn't be buried, by that church, the stigma, and the fear. And I know that, that's something that needed to be challenged, really challenged, by putting a face on, and verbalizing and vocalizing, my face still evolves, it still informs me, to why it is that I'm alive. I mean, so many that I remember, were in the galleries in Harlem, shooting heroin, and getting their syringes out of coffee cans and out of cigarette boxes, and sharpening the syringes, on the back of, matchbooks, that was before, I saw the evolution of what came about because people believed, because people had faith, in harm reduction that we have today, the clean syringes, and all the supplies that we would need, and safe places where we can use, to prevent further overdoses, and even being deputized to be able to hand out to people and to on the streets right there, on any given day. Thank God not today, at my site, but, I can be called into action because I'm trained, to apply the nasal application of Narcan, and see that person before my very eyes that was unconscious, not breathing, not responding, come alive, and maybe even join us and become a part of this community of change, So there's that purpose to my living, that this faith informs me, that I'm just not alive to be alive and try to look pretty. No, but I'm alive to be alive because there's more lives, to be saved. There's what I do, to increase and strengthen my faith is with others in mind. It truly is, about, living to serve, and but yet I don't have that strength in and of myself, but that source that I plug into through music, through prayer, through readings, to sometimes just breathing, taking deep breaths, just taking quiet moments in communion. The fight is good fight, because it is a fight. And to not be consumed by this fight, because I know what it is to be bitter, I know what it is to be resentful, I know what it is to be so consumed with hatred, that I was of no use, of no benefit to my community, so that I was able to remove those obstacles, to be a channel, to receive love, and to allow it to work through me, and even reveal to me where there is an obstacle or a barrier, to request that it be removed, so that I can have it flow through me, to someone else, and it's an everyday, reality and experience that I'm having that's evolving, that continues to evolve, but it shows up in relationship to other people. It's not something that's in isolation, but it seems to me to be stirred up when I'm around other people, in relationship to people like myself, people that others put to the margins, to people that others don't even think about. These are the people I believe that we are continuing to build community and community of change. That's reality based, that's innovative, that's strategic. That is about solutions, that empowers us, to stand, and to face whatever it is that we need to face without fear. Faith is definitely, like it's been written someplace where, we had not been given the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. That faith is what gives me that gift, and I'm appreciative of it. I'm grateful of it. I stop wondering, wow, how I wake up. I just say thank you, thank you, thank you. And then I do something with it to help someone else smile. Sometimes just look, sometimes just listen, sometimes just hug, sometimes just care, and that is faith in action. Because faith to me will always mean action, that comes from a source that always leads to action, a power greater than myself, than the sum total of all of us, but shows up in community, in the spirit of community.
Amen. So yeah, I decided to switch it up so that I can be a little boosted by all that you all are saying. I believe that, again, stigma is the ability to connect with one another and hear the stories of one another. So I'm just so grateful for all that you're saying. I want to go back though and connect with what Hussein was saying around Ed Buck, and sort of connect with that. I became a crystal meth user in 2008. So in 2008, which is 13 years ago, and in the same very circumstances that you described the persons that they found dead. I had recently come out. I had been in the military and I had been in the ministry and I had been married, and I came out and was isolated and estranged from family, isolated and estranged from faith, and really, just really confused, at a time when I thought I was living my truth, right? But deep within, the stigma of race, the stigma of sexuality, and the stigma of being HIV positive, which I was diagnosed as in 2006, which would have been 2 years before I became a drug user. So the circumstances out of which you speak are very, very real. I was introduced to crystal meth in a party of, predominantly white guys in an apartment of a person who was white, and it was very, very scary, and it was shameful, number one, right? Because the people who loved me most, my family, were completely disconnected from what I was doing, and I had no language for what I was doing. I barely had language for my own sexuality, much less that now I'm using drugs after having accomplished so much in my life. And there was just a lot of shame connected to that. So as I was following the case, and I just, just either saw or read about the family members of the victims being in the courtroom, watching the videos, a lot of videos which Ed Buck had recorded of folks injecting crystal meth, and you know, I was horrified, and I've been sober for 10 years. So it just took me, it just transported me right back into that work. And today I lead a fellowship of Black, queer, and trans folks who use crystal meth and are recovering from crystal meth addiction. And it's basically a safe space for us to come together. We travel, we have brunch, we connect in a variety of ways. And it is the joy of my life to be surrounded by people in a context out of which we could have been, you know, we could have been in that space. People who survived that space. And so, you know, how does faith come into play? Like for me, to be able to have found a faith, to have found faith out of ashes, essentially, and to be very much connected to the testimony, if you will, to use that religious language of what we've come out of in a very real and concrete way is powerful. You know, I didn't know much about liberation theology in my previous years of ministry before coming out and going to seminary and getting ordained. But you know, liberation theology teaches the preferential option of the poor, and Jesus is on the side of the marginalized and oppressed. Now, somewhere along the lines, you know, religion got co-opted by empire, and today, you know, is in so many ways in solidarity with empire, against the undocumented, against the poor, against, you know, those of us who are queer and trans and drug addicts and so forth and so on. And so today I make it my ministry to tell the truth about my experience, because, you know, people can see me as a person with a plaid button-up shirt and nice eyeglasses and all of that. But if they don't know, if they can connect with, you know, that experience that we all have of trauma and shame and even triumph, then all we're saying is dogma and theology without the lived experience. People are being delivered from addiction. People are being delivered from, you know, whatever it is that we hold and we carry, and that is the beauty of faith, right? The substance of things not seen, the evidence of things not seen, the substance of things hoped for. That is the essence of faith, and that is, you know, for me, how it connects to my personal and professional life. I don't know how to be in this ministry without telling the truth about who I am and where I've come from. And it is essentially taking what is stigmatized and destigmatizing it by speaking it, and obviously surrounding yourself with people who remind you of who you were and who you are. So it's such a privilege to be in that space right now. And as we move into our third question, and we'll leave space for questions and answer at the end, but our third question is, how have we used faith to dismantle stigma professionally or personally? So question 3, how have we used faith to dismantle stigma both professionally and personally? And we'll start with Erica.
Awesome. Stigma in my work has manifested, I think, most profoundly as isolation and disconnection, as criminalization, and as dehumanization. And we know it very much as the core driver of harm for people who use drugs and their loved ones. It shows up in my work as knowing that you cannot tell EMS that a person is overdosing, but that you need to say instead that they are not breathing, not conscious, knowing that in many areas EMS will respond slowly or not at all to an overdose. It looks like not being able to get a job, even in my beloved denomination, unless you can prove that you are abstinent from all drugs that have been deemed socially unacceptable or illegal. It looks like your urine being used to determine if you are a capable and loving parent. It looks like the national naloxone shortage. It looks like over 97,000 people dying last year alone from an accidental overdose because they could not access the life-saving, life-giving resources they needed to be able to keep themselves and their loved ones safe. The heart of our responses to stigma experienced by people who use drugs has been to center the humanity and divinity of each and every one of us, to center the leadership and voices of people with lived and living experience of substance use, of overdose, and to shift power and resources to strengthen all of the above. It's been about working with churches, families, electeds to examine and revision the language we use to talk about people who use drugs, understanding the power of naming to harm or to heal, to examine the many ways we have institutionalized the othering and dehumanizing of people who use drugs, and being willing to co-create new policies in partnership with people with lived experience and which centers dignity. Most importantly, I think it's about tearing down barriers to connection and returning people to community, understanding that community is where the healing, the magic, the life-giving happens. I think it's exactly as I heard Louie and Michael and Hussein do. It's about being courageous to do the truth telling, to do the holy work of truth telling. So I'm incredibly grateful to be part of this panel, and I will yield to somebody else.
Louie, you're already unmuted, so hey.
Oh, I'm on mute.
We won't have to tell you to unmute this time. You're unmuted, so go ahead.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you. I love you all. I really truly do. And Erica, you're so spot on in everything you say. You know, it just reminds me of the fact, if not for faith, I would be giving power to the virus. The virus would have told me in 1994 that I couldn't be a father. And it was very controversial because, you know, I'm the head of a housing organization, you know, housing people, and we have a prevention message. But it wasn't an oops. And we made a conscious decision. And there was relationship and responsibility involved and the risk that was involved in that decision making. And my son was born, you know, mother healthy, my son healthy. As a matter of fact, in December this year, the 11th, he graduates with his master's in social work. You know, he made that decision, that choice, because faith showed him that we can make progress through the struggles, you know, and that he could make other choices. And faith says, you know, I love you no matter what, you know, I love you, you know, and nothing else makes that decision for me, you know. That's the empowerment of faith, you know, that I could make a decision, and we, because of love and out of love, have our son, and nurturing, you know, nurturing our son to make a decision himself that he now has a family that makes me a grandpa, you know. How this all happened, you know, because someone I loved, you know, died alone, who I never, and I said, I will never, as a member of ACT UP, I said, never alone, you know, never again, you know, and I meant that in every way, you know. I spread that message, you know, about that service of never alone and never using alone, you know, because I know about the aloneness of that feeling, you know, but it's giving me my health, you know, and it helps me with the health of others, you know. It's giving me my family, you know, my daughter as well, you know, her graduation is the same month, okay, and so faith has given me some money too, to be able to show up to these places. I can show up, you know, and be that example. You know, I think it's very important that we be that example, you know, as a Black man, who's gone through, what I need to go through to give hope to someone else that's going through, to let them know, no, you're not alone. But what enables me to do that is faith. It truly is faith, that that speaks to something more. I am more than my virus. I am more than my heroin. I am more than my history of heroin. I am more than my incarceration and years incarcerated and institutionalized. I am more than that. Though that's my lived experience, but I'm more than that. And there's more that I'm living and I'm experiencing, and I'm open to, and I'm in a process of transformation. I'm transformed and I'm being transformed and I'm in a process of transformation, and that's what my faith speaks to, to challenge those forces, that would see me dead, and see the people in my community dead and people who look like me in my community dead, and keeps me able to love, and not mirror the very opposition, that I'm opposed to and that we stand up to, that challenges us every day. It challenges us every day, so it's very real, and I'm grateful that it's real. It's not something spooky. It's not something that can be contained in four walls, but on four corners. Okay, and that says, when I'm sick, you visit, and when I'm in prison, you came to me, and when I'm naked, you clothed me, and when I'm hungry, you fed me, and to the least of these, to me, okay, is what my faith speaks to, and it's not just religion, though there's nothing about the religion, it's spiritual. One could be religious and spiritual, but then one could be spiritual and not religious, but it's a spirituality, that says that I'm more, it's something that says that I'm more when I go and get New York State certified peer, and that leads me to college, at 65. Yes, it tells me, yes, I can, on a real, do the work, faith says, do the work now, and I'm willing to do it, and I'm motivated to do it, and yes, we have something that may be a tool in our arsenal that helps, like the stages of change. That's real in many different ways, not just around drugs, around a lot of different ways, and then I'm still learning on this journey and unlearning, relearning, and that is what gives me my gratitude, because it puts me in relationship with others, like on this panel, others I haven't met yet, that I'm going to meet, it really makes and gives value to my life, a life worth living, where at one time it was called a death sentence.
Hussein.
Thank you, Louie and Erica and Reverend Michael. I will shift now to talk a little bit more about my personal experience. The way I was living my life, I internalized stigmas about my skin color and about my mental health. I am a survivor of child pornography, and I learned through that experience that my body was used and did not belong to me anymore. And so I grew up and I continued to trash it. When I was about 18 years old, I was in a public restroom in Chicago in the North Side, not in the bougie part, but in, we'll call it the proletariat part of Chicago's North Side. And I was with some guy and we were shooting drugs, and I was sharing needles, and he said, I have HIV. And I said, well, if I don't have it yet, I'm going to have it anyway. So hook me up. And I don't know if that is the moment at which I seroconverted. It could have been long before, because I had only gotten 2 tests in my entire life. And I was sexually active since I was 14, and did not ever use a condom, I don't think, until much after my diagnosis. So I don't know if that was when I was infected or how, but I do know it was a lifestyle that I was living. And it was a result of internalizing these stigmas and the stigmatization of my experiences and my health and my body and the way that I looked. And as a result, I just did not care. I did not care. I did not value myself. I did not love myself. My thoughts on practicing safer sex or sex with condoms was that, well, why should I protect sex that is worthless? And that was the attitude I had for a very, very long time. As I started to make efforts to move out of active alcoholism and addiction and into recovery, I also came to develop a racial consciousness and became proud of my skin color, of being Muslim, of being the son of immigrants, of having darker skin than most and also lighter skin than many. I also then came to hate white people and everything associated with whiteness, white culture, whatever that is, white supremacy, white things, white spaces. I was like done with it. White men, even though that's what I desired for a long time, because that's the only standard of beauty I was shown in the spaces where I was raised. And I too then began to take on these stigmatizing views. As a person who was stigmatized for being brown, I then joined a very militant school of thought that stigmatized white people. And as an anti-racist activist, as a person whose spirituality centers around anti-racism, it's very easy to overlook our own prejudices and stigmas against dominant identities and groups that have power and that have access to institutions and resources, and to stay stuck in a mentality of victimhood. And along with that, I refused to do anything that white people were doing. And that included some really transformative healing things like yoga or pranayam, breathwork meditation. And both yoga and meditation, breathwork, pranayam, those all came from the Indian subcontinent, which is where I'm from. So those I thought were my things. That was from my people. This is my culture. This is the spirituality of my ancestors. These are the practices of wellness that my ancestors employed from the beginning of time. Or so I thought, or would like to think. I'm sure that they colonized and settled faces too. But I didn't want any part in yoga and meditation and these crunchy granola things that white people are teaching in LA, because I'm not going to go learn from them. This is my stuff. I realized through doing the work prescribed to me by the guides and mentors and sponsors and people in recovery that have carried me and saved my life, that I have to let go of all of my prejudices and all of the stigmatizing views that I hold, that I thought made me who I was. I thought that to be a good anti-racist was to be militantly anti-white. I started doing the yoga, learning from white yogis. I started doing the breathwork classes and practices, studying with white yogis again, and it changed my life. And I realized that I'm the only one who's losing if I continue to harbor these stigmatizing views towards and against white people. Along the way, through doing the yoga and through doing the pranayam, I was able to heal myself of other people's stigmas against me. I was able to love myself fully as a person with brown skin, was able to love myself fully as someone whose veins carry this virus, HIV. I was able to love myself for my past as a survivor of child pornography, as a survivor of many other traumas, as a sex worker, as a drug addict. So in letting go of my passionate, militant commitment to these stigmas, I then received the blessing and the gift of healing myself from other people's stigmas about and against me. And that all happened because I was told to just have faith in the process and to do as I'm told and to set everything I know about the world aside. And that's what faith is. It's just having a belief. And I always think about blind faith, having a belief in something that I can't explain, that appears on its face to be irrational, that I can't logic. I can't do A plus B equals Y, or if X then Y. It just have the faith and do it, and let go of my prejudices and the stigmas and the this and the that I think are so important. And then instead of being right, I've gotten to be happy, and I've gotten to be peaceful, and I've gotten to connect with my culture and with the culture of my ancestors through learning from white people who may or may not have culturally appropriated from me or my people, but it's neither here nor there, because today I'm happy and I am at ease and I'm peaceful. And now I get to go out into the world and do the work that I care most about and have a bigger impact, because I'm not constantly relapsing and having to take breaks to re-nourish and refeed and sleep after weeks of not sleeping. I'm healthy and I have stability in my life again. So just having faith in something other than the nonsense that sometimes lives up here, which it lives adjacent to some really brilliant ideas, but there's also some nonsense up here. Having faith that it's not just what's up here has been really healing. And also it goes alongside humility and recognizing that I am not always the victim in every situation, and that I have work to do to cleanse myself of stigma and prejudice too. And that is the best way that I can serve and fight stigma in other contexts. And I think that's all I have to say about that. I think now would be question and answer.
Well, I didn't get to answer question 3, and I'm tempted to let what you say live, but I will just add briefly before we do question and answer that I just love the identities that I hold, and I love the experience that I carry. And I just can't imagine, living life in a sanitized way in which that kind of, sterility or the sterileness is the qualification for for service or for ministry or for whatever it is, right? And so it is like being HIV positive, being Black, being queer, you know, being a recovering drug addict, all of those things are part of the experience, you know, living in the questions, you know, having this, you know, as you know, this interesting relationship with whiteness, in a lot of ways that, you know, we're forced to have to move through and critique, and sometimes, you know, be complicit in, and all the things that we are in the struggle right now is just, you know, how I use faith to dismantle stigma, you know, to actually look for the people who are living in those realities, existing in the margins, and being with them, and realizing that if you ain't got, if you're not presenting some, you know, circumstance by which you've been able to you know, move through and prevail, I can't connect. And so, you know, and in this time, you know, also as one who has power, cis, male, you know, privilege, you know, ensuring that we're not exploiting people's bodies by telling their stories for our own, you know, self-indulgence, you know, ensuring that, you know, we are leading budgets and economies that pay people when they speak and when they share and disclose, knowing that that is a kind of labor that many who hold positions of power will never know and understand. And I'll check for questions in the chat. Let's see, I don't see any Q&A, but I just do want to quickly leave space for that. And if there are none, I just want to say thank you all so much for being here. Someone wants each one's contact information, so I guess we can private that to Robin, those of us who are on the panel. Hussein invites anyone who wants to connect or has follow-up questions. He can be reached at the email there. And there's a message to remember to fill evals for all sessions. Go into the agenda, scroll down, and click rate session. Rate session. Thank you all for all the big ups in the chat as well. I see a message here that says it is important to impact the world with education and hope, solutions for the voiceless to understand that there is hope and we are not alone. And Louie, I'm not sure if you're able to access the chat, but if you'd like, I can put your email in the chat.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate
Wonderful.
that. Thank you, Michael.
My pleasure. Well, the next session is at 4:30, and I'm sure it's been 90 minutes for many of you on Zoom, so we don't want you to feel as though you can't take a break before you need to for the next session. So thank you all for being here, and particularly thank our speakers for just sharing your experience and faith and hope, and have a wonderful afternoon. I will also want to remind folks that please tune into what's coming. Please don't miss on Thursday, November 18th at 11:15. There's a poster session recommended practices for religious communities to address HIV-related stigma, a review of training materials. Also on the 18th at 6:30, faith to move forward, moving from the experience of trauma. How can you gather enough motivation and encouragement to put one foot in front of the other? We also want you to save the date for World AIDS Day, which is Wednesday, December 1st. We will be hosting a 1 o'clock program and a 4 o'clock program. There you go. 1 o'clock program will be like a World AIDS Day conference. And at 4 o'clock, My Faith, My Story, film and discussion. And lastly, we are here as the U.S. HIV and AIDS Faith Coalition. If you wish to support our work, please make a gift at Faith HIV to 41444. That's Faith HIV 41444. And if you missed it, that slide will rotate around again. There's a URL there as well. If you can catch that URL, you can donate there as well, or reach out to us at HIV Faith Coalition